My name is Barbara Chandler.
Are you dead right now?
No.
Ever heard that saying, truth is stranger than fiction? Well, get ready, because today we're going deep on a story that takes the cake. We're diving into the enigma of Barbara Chandler.
You're probably more familiar with her son, Christian Weston Chandler, or as the internet knows him, Chris Chan.
Yeah, Chris Chan's online presence is, well, infamous, to put it lightly. But here's the thing. We're not going down the Chris Chan rabbit hole today. Not directly, at least. Today it's all about Barbara.
And this isn't just some side note in someone else's story. This is about a woman who's been called Snorlax, even compared to, get this, a notorious English serial killer. Why? That's what we're here to figure out.
And get this. Our main source, it's CWCki. You know, that wild, constantly updated Wikipedia dedicated to all things Chris Chan. We're talking years of forum posts, observations, speculation, the whole 9 yards. It's messy, contradictory, and completely fascinating.
And that's where things get really interesting. We're not dealing with a straightforward biography here. We're using a crowdsourced narrative, constantly evolving to try and understand how we build stories online, especially around someone like Barbara Chandler.
Because let's be real, there's something about this woman's story that just pulls you in. But it also makes you think about how easy it is for stories to get twisted, especially online.
Exactly. Take her early life, for example. The CWCki excerpts paint these two totally different pictures. On the one hand, you've got her high school yearbook, right? She seems like a pretty put-together young woman. Treasurer of the Future Homemakers of America, reporter for the School Safety Patrol, even in the Latin Club.
Latin Club and perfect attendance 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
Not exactly screaming Snorlax, is it?
Not at all. But then you have Chris's side of the story. He describes her childhood as this really sheltered, redneck, simple country upbringing. Lots of sewing, church going, that kind of thing.
It's like looking at two completely different people. So which was it? Was it all an act in high school, trying to fit into this mold that wasn't really her? Or did things change later on? Or maybe?
Maybe it was a little of both. I mean, it's totally possible she enjoyed those things in high school, but also felt the pressure of small-town life, you know? Like everyone expecting her to be the good girl. And then as her life got more complicated, maybe that started to slip.
And complicated might be putting it lightly when you look at Barbara's relationships. Before Bob, she was married multiple times, even went by the last name Smithy for a bit. And of course, that just makes the whole Cole situation even more strange.
Right, Cole, Chris's older half-brother. The CWCki deep dive on his paternity is a whole other thing. Barbara was really evasive about who Cole's father actually was.
She insisted this Jack Dale Smithy was the father, but get this. No marriage license, no photos, no proof that this Jack Smithy guy even existed.
It's like he just disappeared into thin air. It makes you wonder, why make up this huge lie, especially when it comes to your own children? What was Barbara trying to hide?
Maybe it was about control, you know? Maybe she wanted to rewrite her past. Or maybe, and this is where it gets really interesting, it points to this pattern of secrecy and manipulation that follows her throughout her life, especially with Chris.
And that is exactly what this deep dive is all about. We're not just trying to find out facts about Barbara's life. It's about understanding how those facts were shaped, twisted even, and then presented to us through CWCki and the internet's obsession with Chris Chan.
It really is like we're putting together this puzzle and half the pieces are missing, and then the other half might be from a totally different puzzle.
Yeah, and still there are these patterns, these things that keep coming up in Barbara's behavior that we just can't ignore. Like this need to control everything. It pops up all over the CWCki posts, especially in her relationship with Chris.
You see it in how she uses guilt trips and even, like, threatens suicide to get her way. There's that one story where she threatened to stop taking her medication if Chris didn't do what she wanted.
That is just so manipulative. And it wasn't just emotional manipulation either. CWCki talks about times when there was physical abuse, too. It's really disturbing when you think about what their home life must have been like.
And it all gets so messy so fast. Where do you draw the line between being overprotective and straight up enabling someone? Especially with Chris's autism diagnosis, it makes you wonder.
Right. Did Barbara even get what Chris needed as a neurodivergent person? Or was she so focused on controlling him that she missed it? Or worse, used it to her advantage?
There's this one thing Chris said that's always stuck with me. It's in the CWCki article. He mentions having dreams. Dreams about, well, having sex with his mother. And it's just so disturbing. You really hope it isn't what it sounds like, you know?
And the saddest part is it wasn't just a weird dream. The incest incident and then Chris's arrest, it's awful proof of how toxic their whole relationship became.
Yeah, it's rough. Even when you think you're prepared for how bad it gets. And listen, I know we have to be careful about throwing around diagnoses, but you can't ignore the possibility of narcissistic personality disorder here.
Especially with how Barbara acts in other parts of her life. All those claims about being royalty, blaming everyone else for her money problems. It's a classic narcissistic behavior, wanting to be admired and never taking responsibility.
And that need to be in control all the time, not seeing Chris as his own person with his own thoughts and feelings. It's like she saw him as, I don't know, an extension of herself or something, someone she could use to get what she wanted.
Which leads us to what happened after Bob died. Things went from dysfunctional to, well, honestly bizarre.
The begging videos, the constant money troubles, trying so hard to hold on to any control over this chaotic life. It's almost Shakespearean how tragic it all is.
But then again, you have to wonder how much of it was for show, Don't forget, by this point, Chris Chan was already a huge deal online. Everything Barbara did was out there for everyone to see. It wasn't just her life anymore. It was public.
So how much of what's on CWCki is the real Barbara Chandler? And how much of it is like an act? Maybe even a cry for help, but played out online through her son's weird internet fame.
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's probably one we'll never know the answer to for sure. But that doesn't mean this whole story can't teach us something.
It's like we're watching this train wreck in slow motion, But we're not just here for the spectacle of it all. We're trying to understand what caused the derailment in the first place.
Yeah, and maybe if we can figure out the why behind all this, we can all learn to be a little more careful navigating the online world ourselves.
Exactly. So where does that leave us? With this really unsettling, kind of confusing picture of Barbara Chandler. She was this controlling figure, but also a victim in a lot of ways, enabling Chris, but also like caught in his web too. It's all playing out online for the whole world to see.
And we can't forget about the timing of all this. We're talking about the very early days of internet culture, right? Back then, the lines between what was public and what was private were even blurrier than they are now.
Oh, absolutely. This was way before social media blew up, back when online communities were smaller, more tight-knit. And with Chris Chan and CWCki, people became obsessed with documenting every little thing he did. And Barbara got swept up in all that too.
It's easy to judge looking back on it now, but put yourself in her shoes. Imagine that kind of attention, that constant scrutiny, especially when most people didn't really even understand how far the internet could reach. It'd be like being on a reality show 24/7, but you can't ever turn the cameras off.
And you have no say in how your story gets told. Because even with all the speculation, all the different versions of events on CWCki, one thing's clear. Barbara wanted control. Control over her life, control over Chris, control over how people saw her.
Yeah, and that need for control just kept coming out in these really destructive ways. The manipulation, the hoarding, even those strange claims about being descended from royalty. It's like she was grabbing at anything that could make her feel powerful, trying to rewrite her story into something she could live with.
It makes you wonder, what if CWCki never happened? What if Chris Chan hadn't become this huge internet thing? Would Barbara's life have been different? Could she have found a healthier way to deal with all that need for control?
It's impossible to know for sure, but it shows you just how big of an impact online fame, or infamy, I guess you'd call it, can have on people, especially for someone like Barbara, who is already dealing with a lot of personal struggles.
It's a cautionary tale, no doubt about it. Which brings us back to the big question. What can we take away from all this? From this messy, confusing, and often really disturbing look at Barbara Chandler's life?
It reminds us that behind every meme, every viral video, every crazy headline, there's a real person with a real story. And those stories are complicated. They don't fit into the neat little boxes we try to put them in online.
So the next time you're about to click on some article about someone like Chris Chan, remember Barbara. Remember that there are real people caught in the crossfire, people whose lives are shaped and sometimes even destroyed by the internet. It's not always just entertainment.
That's a good point to end on. This deep dive into Barbara Chandler's life has really been something. And yeah, we might never have all the answers, but it's obvious that her story, just like CWCki itself, shows us just how complicated family, identity, and life in the internet age can be.
I couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive has been eye-opening, that's for sure. We may never know the full story, but Barbara Chandler's life and the ever-changing, often conflicting narratives found on CWCki offer a powerful look at how family, identity, and the constant presence of the internet all
Turn me loose, you silly goose.
You used to do that more flirtingly.